Welcome to the final $10,000 in your offer. This is going to be the toughest part of the whole deal because the buyer wants to have the last word and the seller wants to have the last word, and everybody is looking at you and the other agent to come up with that extra $10,000, which makes for a very interesting way of doing business if you're going to let it happen. So there are actually two different approaches we can take to saving that $10,000 for you and to make it happen for the buyer and the seller. The first approach is to deal with that $10,000 block, which happens to be the last part of the deal. And the way we're going to deal with that is we're going to take it from the perspective of the buyer and we're going to take it from the perspective of the seller. As far as the seller is concerned, $10,000 is $10,000. As far as the buyer is concerned, it's $10,000. They're really not sure if they're overpaying or what's the value of the property if they have to sell it a year from now. So we've got to put that into perspective for them so that they understand that the $10,000 that they are going to spend today is really a fraction of $10,000 over a 5-year period. And here's how the math works. Let's assume that we have a mortgage financing percentage at 3.5, which makes it a factor of about 4.6. In other words, it's $4.60 per thousand is what it's going to cost the buyer to borrow. On $10,000, that's $46 per month. Take that across a 5-year period of 60 months, and what have we got? Well, that's a lot less than the $10,000. Now, let's look at the price of the house, assuming that it's approximately $800,000, growing at the rate of about 6% a year, making the first year a $48,000 increase. What's it costing them for the first year? Well, it's $46 times 12. What's it costing them over a 5-year period? What's the increased value over a 5-year period? Does it make sense now for them to have to pay less than $3,000 over a 5-year period to increase the value of their property by about $250,000? And what does it mean to them later when they go to sell the property and somebody wants $10,000 extra dollars out of their pocket? Is it $10,000 or is it under $3,000? So to put it in perspective, we need to take a look at what the true value is of that $10,000. Do we now feel confident that we can sell the $10,000 to the buyer as a good investment, as a way of avoiding losing money? Because here's the other approach too. If they're thinking that they're going to save the $10,000 by waiting, it might take 3 months before they find another house like the one they're looking for. Now, if the $800,000 house is appreciating at the rate of approximately $48,000 a year, 3 months later, they're going to be paying $12,000 more for the same type of property, in which case they haven't really saved the $10,000 at all. They've lost an extra $2,000 plus 3 months of rental or other expenses that they've incurred by not owning this property. Does this make sense? The second approach to all of this is very simple. You have an offer that's conditional on finance and inspection, typically. We know that the finance condition is pretty much a done deal, so the inspection is where the problem lies. Now, if your buyer says to you, well, I'm willing to put in an offer today, but what if I change my mind tomorrow? How do I get out of the deal? Well, in my world, the answer is if you want to get out tomorrow, take the door today because I don't want to waste the time. But just in case you do want to waste the time and you don't have a problem with it, here's the deal. You want to close that back door. You do not want them to be able to walk away from this deal over a $50 torn screen So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put together an offer with a clause that says this offer is conditional upon the buyer arranging at his own expense an inspection of the subject property and obtaining a result to his absolute satisfaction. Now that means they can walk away tomorrow. So in the old days, my old days, we used to put in a clause that said, should such inspection reveal major deficiencies, which the buyer is unwilling to accept, and the seller is unwilling or unable to remedy, then the offer becomes null and void, and the deposit's returned, and so on and so forth. But the problem was that the court system had a difficulty with the word major deficiencies. So what I have done is I've translated that into an actual number. In the case of a house that's approximately $700,000-800,000, we can put in a number like 5,000, 10,000. So here's what happens. This offer is conditional upon the buyer arranging an inspection of the subject property at his own expense within 24 hours or 48 hours or 5 days. And should such inspection reveal deficiencies which a qualified home inspector estimates to be more than $5,000, which the buyer is unwilling to accept and the seller is unwilling or unable to remedy, then the offer becomes null and void, the deposit's returned, etc., etc., etc. Your buyer may not want to sign something like that. So what you need to do is you need to explain to the buyer that every house has deficiencies, and $5,000 in an $800,000 or $900,000 house, about half of 1% in terms of deficiencies, is not unreasonable. And take a look around you. Do you see $5,000 in deficiencies? No. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put that clause in there to give the seller the impression that we are really serious about this house. We're not just playing games. And what looks like a condition that we might be able to walk away from now becomes a condition that's virtually firm. They're going to get excited about it. So when you offer less of a purchase price on your buyer's behalf, your buyer will actually gain in the overall scheme of things. Now, when the time comes to present this to the seller, you have a huge edge. And let me explain what that edge is. Because you're now $5,000 apart, unfortunately the seller doesn't realize that, and the buyer isn't thinking about it, but you are. So when the time comes when you're $10,000 apart, and you can turn to your seller, or the listing agent turns to the seller and says, I understand you don't want to give it away for an extra $10,000, but what if we were only $5,000 apart? Would you be willing to sign this? I happen to know from personal experience, they will sign it. They will say $5,000, not a huge amount. On a $900,000 property, I can live with $5,000 less. Now you say to them, here's the offer. On the offer, there is a conditional clause that says that the buyer is willing to accept $5,000 in deficiencies. We're only $5,000 apart. Here's the pen. Sign it now. In the final analysis, this will save your commission and the other agent's commission because you're not going to have to put it out of your pocket. It'll save the deal, and you don't have to go through the math either. But that's an option you have. The option is there because I've created that clause for you people, and you need to use it if you want to save money and deals. So 2 options, people. 1, you can do the math and show them that $10,000 is not $10,000. That's for the buyer. The other option is put in a clause on the condition on inspection that will help you close the gap a little bit between parties. Now, what if you're representing the seller and the buyer's agent brings you a condition on inspection to the buyer's absolute satisfaction? What do you do now? Well, have you ever heard of Zorro? Strike the clause out and rewrite yours. Put it in there. Conditional, not to the buyer's absolute satisfaction, but based on what a qualified home inspector would estimate to be more than whatever the number is, and put it in. Now, the buyer's agent may not like it because he's going to wonder, what are you doing? How is my buyer going to accept that? Explain it to him the same way I just explained it to you. We want to make the seller happy. We want to look serious. We want to make sure that we end up having this deal. And if we want to actually put in an offer or finalize a price that's less, a little less, maybe $5,000 or $10,000, maybe $15,000 less, it's in the buyer's best interest to put in that clause. And you want to make sure that that buyer is serious about closing as well. So this is a good opportunity for you to learn how to use that clause both as a buying agent and as a selling agent. Good luck with it.